Welcome back. You're tuned into Halftime Report on CNBC-TV18, and as promised, let's focus on the Indian pharma industry's track record with US FDA. Largely, it has been a disappointing year for Indian pharma companies when it comes to their inspection by US regulatory body. Ekta gets us all the details on this. Ekta, take it away.
It's been a very active and, might I say, largely disappointing year for the Indian pharma companies when it comes to inspections by the US drug regulator. First, a quick recap. India has over 650 US FDA compliant plants, the largest number outside of the US. After a hiatus of around 2 years due to COVID-19, the US drug regulator picked up the pace of physical re-inspections of plants in around Feb this year. The drug regulator hence had a backlog of plants that either needed routine inspections, those with outstanding issues where remediation was complete, and inspections which were related to new drug approvals. The outcome, it seems, has been patchy. Now, many of the companies, for example, could not successfully resolve issues that already existed. For instance, companies which had been issued an official action indicated status earlier, which essentially means the US drug regulator can withhold approvals from the plant. Either saw them continue or even escalate. Examples include Sun Pharma's Halol plant in Gujarat, which was issued an official action status in March 2020, continued to be classified with an OAI status after it was re-inspected in May 2022 and issued 10 observations. Similarly, Cipla's Goa facility too was categorized as an OAI in Feb 20 and issued a warning letter, was re-inspected this year, issued 6 observations, of which 3 were in fact repeats from the earlier inspection, and continued to be categorized as an OAI by the US drug regulator. Some examples of an escalation include Glenmark's Baddi plant, which was issued a warning letter in October 2019, re-inspected and issued 7 observations this year, only for it to be issued an import alert by the US drug regulator, which means the drugs produced by the plant were not compliant with US standards. Similarly, other escalations included Lupin's Tarapur plant, Glenmark's Goa plant, and Aurobindo's Unit 1, all which already had an OAI and were eventually issued a warning letter after a re-inspection. Another example is Aurobindo's Unit 9, which had an OAI, issued 10 observations, or Lupin's Mandidi plant, which had a warning letter issued to it in 2019, was re-inspected and issued a total of 16 observations. Now, while there have been some successes such as Zydus's Moraiya facility, Lupin's Goa and Somerset plants, Alembic's injectable plant, all with pending US FDA issues being successfully resolved, there is some concern on why many plants are facing a tough time. Analysts point out that it could be due to the fact that the long hiatus resulted in a gap between what the US drug regulator now wants and the remediation undertaken by the companies. Hence, the standards of what is now required might have changed. Many of the stock reactions are now quite benign when it comes to US drug issues. Reason being, a large part of the negative news might be factored in, and investors believe that companies have other growth levers and can tackle the issues eventually. For example, Sun Pharma has a strong specialty business which would compensate any loss, and Cipla has said that they are looking at transferring key products filed from Goa to other plants. But one must be aware that US FDA issues do impact business. Remediation impacts costs and drug approvals slow down. Case in point would be Biocon's biosimilar approvals held up due to issues at their Bangalore and Malaysia facilities, and the likes of Torrent, despite a strong India business, seeing a dip in the US due to 2 of their facilities being under the regulatory lens.
Ekta, thank you so much for bringing us that summary and telling us what's really happening in the pharma industry as far as US FDA issues are concerned. So let's take this conversation forward. We have with us Bino Pathiparampil, who's the Director of Research, InCred Capital, to analyze what's happening in the industry and how bad of an impact could it have on pharma stocks as well. Bino, good afternoon. Thanks a lot for joining us. Well, you heard Ekta talking about what kind of US FDA issues these listed companies are facing. What kind of an impact do you see here? And what do you think is the reason why we have been seeing these negative outcomes from US FDA inspections?
Sure. Hi, good afternoon. So we need to look at US FDA compliance, good manufacturing practices compliance as an ongoing process. So it is not that a plant once becomes compliant and stays forever. There are periodic inspections, periodic change in processes, systems, new additions, deletions, the manufacturing manufacturing practices, practice standards can themselves change. So US FDA compliance is an ongoing process, and this process was kind of disturbed during the 2 years of the pandemic lockdown, which probably resulted in a break in that continuous compliance process. So I certainly believe that this break has contributed to a lot of companies again getting observations post previous compliance issues. But at the same time, you need to keep in mind that there are companies which are coming out of that as well. So it is a continuous learning curve which these companies are going through. And as we go ahead, these issues will get resolved over the next few quarters. Having said that, I would also like to bring to your attention that as far as the larger companies are concerned, say Sun, Lupin, Cipla, Dr. Reddy's, etc., they have a very diversified portfolio with multiple manufacturing sites across the globe, to the extent that these US FDA actions are not impacting their businesses to a great extent. Of course, as long as there is no import alert, and so far we have not seen any big import alert for these companies. So it is a process by which some plants will have some compliance issues which will get resolved, but the growth will be driven by products from the other plants.
Sure.
We need to look at this as a continuous process.
Okay. But Bino, there are many plants which have continuous issues since now 2018 to 2020. Plants where the official action indicated has not been able to be resolved successfully post a reinspection in 2022, as well as some plants where there's been an escalation as well, maybe to a warning letter and maybe one to an import alert as well. From that context, what do you think has been the slip between the cup and the lip?
So like I mentioned, the process improvement in these plants is a continuous process. Certainly, as you mentioned as well, the 2 years of gap that happened during the COVID pandemic lockdown has certainly impacted that process, which needs to now get back on track, which I'm sure is happening given the speed at which US FDA is also conducting inspections and the companies are responding. So in a few quarters' time, I expect the whole process to be back on track and the companies getting back into compliance.
Okay. Bino, as Ekta was also mentioning, that stock price reaction to these US FDA outcomes has been quite benign. And you mentioned some big companies like Sun Pharma also having some other portfolios. So do you think the impact of these US FDA outcomes, the negative outcomes, so to say, would not be much on these stocks, and the street is looking at something else which is fundamentally working for these companies?
Sure. So one reason is that what we already discussed, the large companies already have a diversified portfolio with multiple plants, so that FDA issues at one plant is not really affecting the numbers at an overall basis. But of course, I would qualify that as long as there is no import alert, which we haven't seen for any of the bigger companies. The second reason is that these are old issues, so to some extent, no new approvals from these US FDA impacted sites is already in the stock price. So continuation of that is not really impacting the expected numbers from the companies. And third, in very select cases, there could be an impact where there is a specific big product that the market is expecting. And if that particular product doesn't come because of an FDA issue, there could be issues. But as of now, we haven't seen any big impact so far. But if Cipla is not able to, launch Abraxane on time, there could be some impact to the stock price. At the same time, coming to the smaller companies, say Torrent, Ipca, etc., for them, the number of facilities are lower. But again, they have been impacted for quite some time, and the numbers from new approvals from these facilities have already been toned down significantly by the street. All this is resulting in the benign stock price reaction.
Okay, all right, Bino, we're going to let it go on that note. It's always a pleasure to discuss all of these pharmaceutical issues and a deep dive into the larger trends as well. Thank you very much for joining in and speaking with us. So that's the view coming in, that yes, compliance is largely an ongoing process, and let's see whether any of these big companies do see a delay when it comes to a couple of their key products. There was some news with regards to Easy Trip, so maybe that stock should come up for you. But as of now, we need to take a short break. Up next, technical Sudeep Shah of SBI Securities will join in.